Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the UFOcast does Captain Scarlet, Big Ben Strikes Again. So again, in pretty much every order of the show's run, this comes as episode 3, with the exception of the VHS tapes back in the 80s and 90s where this was episode 9. So again, we're early on in the run, and as I talked about last episode, where Captain Blue was sort of the hero to some extent, until Captain Scarlet took over with the indestructible bit. Once again, he is at the heart of the action and is the one that solves the mystery. And Captain Scarlet comes across as being a little dense, to be honest. You have that prolonged explanation of what's been going on at the end over the dinner party where the two angels just kind of sit there and don't say anything, which is a bit odd. But yes, Blue is the brainy one and Captain Scarlet is the brawny one. Or at least that's how the series is setting them up at this point. I think as it goes on, we find out that Captain Scarlet is a little bit more of a brain himself. But certainly from these first few episodes, that's the way it appears to me. I feel this one was quite memorable to me as a kid. I think, particularly watching as a kid, the idea that there was something educational about the episode. Not that would have appealed to me at the time. The idea that I was being taught something, but this idea that the problem could be solved by applying some science and some maths was pretty good. And I think the opening is genuinely spooky and creepy. This idea that the Mysterons can just take over your vehicle without destroying it. And we'll talk about this later in Mysteron powers, but I don't recall this happening very frequently as the series went on. Certainly the introduction, they must destroy, seems to be the path of the course as the series goes on. But certainly last episode with whatever Captain Black does by staring at the plane to make it crash into its flight, and here he just happens to be round the corner as Casey comes by in the truck, and then suddenly the truck is under Mysteron control, is a creepy power. And then the bit where once he's been dumped in the car park and is trying to figure out what's going on until he mysteriously gets thumped over the head. And again, that's not really explained. It's a really creepy setup, really atmospheric, still holds up in that regard. And there's a plethora of guest puppets on show during that initial setup with all those policemen. Really nice to see those characters. I guess really nice to see the effort that is gone to populate the world with these people. I mean, you could simply have had just one cop car, and they decided to have a couple, and they get their own little personalities and banter. The middle section of the episode, I guess, where they're actually whizzing the tape back and forth and listening, it just feels awfully quaint. It's not a criticism per se. I just think that aspect of the episode is somewhat aged badly. Well, any technology really, and just the idea that London in the 2060s will look like that, where everybody is using the microgramma D font on their shops. For those of you who don't know, that's the font that's used for the episode titles on Captain Scarlet, and later was used for the UFO logo. So it's a very familiar font in the Jerry Anderson universe. It just tickled me that most of the shops are using that font for their signs in the year 2068. That transporter, I feel we'll see that transporter again. We'll see the nuclear device again. Another reminder that back in the 60s, the future was nuclear, which seems very odd to us now, that was the world that was envisaged, that everything would be. Though I suppose interestingly, it's being decommissioned. They've specially got this special underground place to stick it. And in this case, actually ends up blowing up. So maybe there was an idea that nuclear power wouldn't necessarily last. Interesting to think about it in those terms now that we know that. Well, I don't know. There are still people who advocate nuclear power as the way forward at the moment, whilst we're working on renewable energy. It's just an interesting aspect of the episode. Once again, this story plays into my theory that the war between the Earth and the Mysterons is less an equal match, or is something that the Mysterons are really trying hard at, that this feels more like them playing a game. Because if they were purposeful about destroying London, they could definitely have made it harder for the bomb to be found. They could have killed Casey. If he'd been killed, then there would have been no clue as to where it was, and the bomb would have gone off. So again, it feels like this is all part of a of a game that they're playing with Spectrum for their own amusement, more than outright revenge, which is what they state that their aim is actually about. But it seems that they're just having fun. I suppose you can see it in terms of saying, well, actually, rather than striking the killer blow early on, that they're wanting to get the most in terms of terror out of humanity. But with something like this, actually, who knows? It's only a handful of Spectrum personnel that know about the threat. This is the interesting thing. I don't know. There's that thing in the first episode where Captain Scarlet says we can hear him over our radios. I don't know whether it's ever explicitly said. Does everybody on Earth hear what the Mistron threat is when it comes over? Is this just sort of anybody who's tuning into the radio hears the Mistron threat, and so everybody can be scared about it and stuff? It's interesting. I'm not sure whether that one is ever actually explored and revealed. If anybody who's listening can pinpoint something for me, do please put a comment on the website, UFOcast.co.uk. That will be interesting. And now it's time for this week's Spectrum Agent Report from Steve Hatcher of the Hoovers.
It's not a bomb, it's a nuclear device for civilian use. Well, that's okay then. As one of the guards accompanying the transporter through central London reassures his colleague, relax, what can go wrong? Just what were the authorities thinking? Transporting a massive not-a-bomb through a major city? A device that is so sensitive it has to be suspended from wires inside the transporter to avoid being jiggled about too much. And which, should it go off, would take out the entire city, would seem foolhardy at the best of times. During a time of war, it appears appallingly reckless, to say the least. To have that convoi exceptionnel accompanied by just two comically complacent clowns in pretty blue uniforms and fancy caps, driving what looks like a regular car, adds a layer of farce to the whole situation. Just what were these two expected to do when things go wrong? The Mistrons in their city on Mars must have read Captain Black's report, the one starting, "Hey gang, you're not going to believe this," and rubbed their hands, if they have hands, in glee. Surely these humans are too stupid to survive. For the sake of the universe, Darwin tells us they have to lose this war of nerves and be wiped out. Just a quick aside about London. Just what is going on? The streets appear almost deserted. No pedestrians, no traffic apart from one car that conveniently stalls at traffic lights, allowing a casual moment of sexism. Not even any parked cars to speak of. Even the car parks are empty. Has the city been taken over by Yeti in the underground or mysterious dinosaurs? Well, anyway, of course, the Mistrons take over the transporter and drive it away, together with its sole driver, Macy, and hide it in a car park, setting the not-a-bomb's timer to explode. Macy is knocked unconscious, but comes round in time to hear Big Ben strike 13 and to stagger out into the street, where for some reason he fails to pay much attention to where he actually is. You know, the sort of information that might be really useful if you're trying to stop a really big bang, and wanders off until he's found. Meanwhile, Colonel White briefs Captains Blue and Grey. I always liked it when members of Spectrum other than the core team show up. It suggests that this is a real organisation, not just a bunch of mates in fancy dress. Sadly, Grey then vanishes after being told what to do, although we do get to hear Captain Ochre later on too. For some reason the Angels are launched, not quite clear why, although from Colonel White's barked, "This is a red alert, not a stroll around the deck," as they're preparing to launch. Spectrum's commander is clearly in a bit of a tiz. He's lucky those plucky girl pilots don't tell him where to stick his attitude. Anyway, by pure chance, Scarlet finds Macy while cruising around deserted London, and the driver tells everyone about the 13 strikes of Big Ben. It's Captain Blue who sees the significance, something to do with the relative speeds of radio and sound waves and blah blah maths. In any case, this narrows the search down to 2 car parks. Why no one thought of looking in the one nearest to where Macy was found isn't mentioned. Scarlet is confused, not the sharpest tool, our hero, but finds the transporter and drives it off to a big hole just 10 miles out of London, where it's apparently safe for a massive nuclear device to explode. So that's okay then. Of course, Big Ben strikes again. It makes no sense whatsoever. Absolutely none. But then that's true of most Captain Scarlet plots. The story relies absolutely on both sides in the war of nerves being remarkably stupid, and on the day being saved by a convoluted piece of logic from Captain Blue, much to Scarlet's confusion, and on Scarlet's bravery. Although, as he is absolutely aware of his own indestructibility, is it really bravery at all? He is taking no risk, at least not to himself. So, it's a pile of old tosh, but you gotta love it. It's fun, exciting and good to look at. I was 9 when Captain Scarlet and the Mysteron started, and I loved it. It was the best thing I'd ever seen. I had the first issue of TV21 comic and sent off to be a junior member of Spectrum. I loved it in 1967, and I still do.
And if you'd like to be a Spectrum agent in a future week, please head over to ufocast.co.uk/captain and sign up. So let's have a look at our 4 things that we're looking for. New Mystron powers. I'm sort of going to say this is a new Mystron power, though we've sort of hedged around it in the last few episodes, but the taking over of a vehicle just by looking at it. We had Captain Black looking at the plane as it took off and then later it crashing, which seemed to be linked. Captain Black being present seems to be something that has to happen in these episodes. But this is more specifically the vehicle is then under Mystron control without it having been destroyed. That is seemingly a new Mystron power, and I forget whether it's ever used again. We will have to keep tabs on that. And because they don't destroy the vehicle or the Casey, then we are on Mystron still at large. Well, it is just Captain Black in this case. Is it a win or a loss? Well, this is most definitely a win for Spectrum. The bomb is successfully taken to somewhere safe for it to explode, and Captain Scarlet is killed again, but obviously he will live to fight another day. And Mystron puppets, obviously it's just Captain Black again, so I probably will put something in the post on the website just to point you in the direction of the Mystron puppets gallery that I'm building up as each episode goes along. And I'm actually going to add something into this episode as I'm recording. I'm going to put a note on each of the previous posts for the 2 episodes that I've already recorded at this point. But basically, you'll have to go to the website to have a look. But I'm going to have a sort of table of the episode, what my recollection is of whether I liked it, whether I thought it was okay or whether I didn't like it previously, and then I'm going to put an update to say what I thought of it this time round. I think on the whole, I probably enjoyed Big Ben Strikes Again less this time, in spite of what I said about the spookiness at the beginning. I think the first half is definitely stronger, but it does drag a little bit as they are solving the problem, which is not to say I dislike the episode, but I think it's gone from a I like it to an it's okay episode. So that's it for this time. Next time will be episode 4.783.